We continue to develop the heavy burden of finding the greatest conceivable being and the characteristics this God should possess. What attributes should this being possess to be considered the greatest conceivable being? The driving force for God's attributes is the requirement for all knowledge. Since humans demand true answers about ultimate reality, death, and evil, we seek a being who must know everything. We continue to hit upon and grapple with the changing nature of human bodies and knowledge. When we considered the laws of identity and change, we often talk about things going out of existence. Leaves wither and fall. The beauty queen wrinkles and ages. And stars explode. The identity of everything we know changes. In the famous play Hamlet, Hamlet contemplates action and the future. He kicks off this soliloquy by uttering the phrase, "To be, or not to be, that is the question." Death, for humans, is the ultimate known ending. Yet the change involved with death is unknown. Can something actually be unchanging? What attributes would be required to not change? You would have to be eternal, because if you are a created or dependent being, you change. In addition, we have to consider timelessness. You could not be affected by the changes of time, so the being would have to be outside of time. You would have to have all knowledge. If you gained knowledge, you would change. You would have to be immutable in any physical or spiritual sense. Whatever substance or essence the object was made of could not change, degrade, or grow. You would have to be non-dependent in any way upon anything of matter, or immaterial substances, time, or other beings. If you are affected by an outside being, you could change, especially in knowledge. Therefore, to be completely unchanging, you would have to possess all of the following: all-knowing, eternal, timeless, non-dependent, immutable. Why do we think God should possess an unchanging nature? We witness this idea as well with knowledge. To possess all knowledge, one cannot gain more knowledge. There cannot be something that God does not know, which means God's knowledge, at least, must be unchanging. But there is more. If God's substance changed, then God is becoming something more. Or God's substance would be dependent. If God is subject to an outside force that changes him, or is dependent upon some outside substance, then we must question God's ability to possess all knowledge. Man might have knowledge of the wind, but cannot fully understand all hurricanes. So too, forces outside of God would lead to insufficient knowledge. Next, if God is becoming something else, which would also mean there is some time factor applied to God, would he know what he is becoming? Things that change imply time, a before and an after. If God has a before and an after, is there some greater cosmic time to which God is subject? Binding God to another timeline would mean God would lack all knowledge. There could exist a changing universal being with all knowledge inside our universe, but with changing substance, changing external knowledge, and bound to some different timeline. We could theorize about this universal being who is easier to understand. We could search for this pantheistic God who is changing, who has all knowledge of our universe, became the God of our universe, and therefore knows about human death. But what is outside the universal being? What or who has knowledge about ultimate reality? So while I acknowledge that these changing attributes are possible, in the end, the greatest conceivable being we are looking for should possess an eternal, timeless, all-knowing, non-dependent, unchanging nature. Another option involves an eternal, timeless God who lives outside time, but is stuck in his own timeline with something outside himself, one of many eternal gods. This being is, for all intents and purposes, all-knowing about this universe and all-powerful within this universe. This, lesser, God would know about death because he created this universe. So he can answer all our questions about death. But what about ultimate reality? Just like the pantheistic being, this being would have limited knowledge and limited presence outside his existence. So again we must ask, what is ultimate reality? What other being or substance exists? We might say a lesser God has sufficient knowledge for our human questions, but not complete knowledge of all reality. While this lesser changing universal being is possible, I am making a case based on evidence that the greater, single God should exist. Even if a lesser God exists, we can make God easier to understand to our rational mind. Or we can search for the greatest conceivable being, which everything in the universe of logic and experience suggests should exist, even if such a being is beyond our comprehension. Either way, whether a lesser God, a pantheistic God, or the greater eternal God exists, He must speak with humans for us to have certainty about who or what exists. Still, everything humans know, everything we experience changes. There can exist only one unchanging, non-dependent substance, just like there can only be one all-knowing, omnipresent living being. The unchanging substance of this being would undergird all of reality. What is the crucial concept? To be unchanging, your substance must be unchanging. For a being to be unchanging, he must possess all knowledge. To have all knowledge, the knowledge level must be unchanging. Why is that significant? The single eternal God must possess unchanging knowledge and substance unaffected by time.